Good morning, babies. Good afternoon. Welcome to another session of Sitting with Dr. Lob-EZ. We's fitting to sprint down the hall of knowledge. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get started right away. This section is going to be about absolutism in Central and Eastern Europe. Okay, we've already talked about absolutism in France and England and Spain. All right, so we need to talk about political differences between Eastern and Western Europe and how those the type of absolutism might be slightly different, and how East Austria regains its juju, its power after its defeat in the 30 Years' War. And then we're going to talk about the rise of Prussia. Okay, that's not the Polish Russians, y'all. It's Prussia. It's a different country entirely, as far as I know. And, well, there's 4 Freddys we need to know about, but we're going to break it up, so you only need to know about 2. You don't need to know about 2. All right, and then we're going to talk about the Russian Tsar, Crazy Ivan, and Peter the Giant. Well, actually, it's Peter the Great, but he's a big old dude. All right. Moving on. All right, so we need to go back a little bit. All right, go back to the Middle Ages. Well, the bubonic plague. All right, bubonic plague and the 100 Years' War. All right, took place in the 14th century. All right, and those 2 epic events have a major impact on Western Europe. Well, it killed 1/3 to 1/2 the population. This is true. However, from a political standpoint, it facilitates the ending of feudalism. All right, it brings it down. People begin to show allegiance to their king as opposed to a landowner. And for economic purposes, people begin to move to the cities after the bubonic plague had swept through and killed so many people. There was a magnet that drew people from the countryside, all right? And as a result, over time, the peasants or serfs were able to gain their freedom or just better conditions, all right? And so that's very important for you to understand, because that didn't take place in Central and Eastern Europe, all right? So the divide is about right here. All right, there's a river. There's a river right here, the Elbe River. Everything to the east of it, it's a lot different. In Eastern Europe, there isn't the liberation of the peasants and the liberation of the serfs. In fact, it intensifies. All right? So let me go back. The people, the population was pretty sparse. All right? It was not heavily populated. There are not a lot of cities, large cities and towns in this part of Europe, in Central and Eastern Europe, all the way up through here as well, okay? And so what we're going to see is people don't really have an opportunity, the peasants, or serfs, to go anywhere because the cities are so few and far between, all right? And as a result of that, the nobility maintains its power. And since there's no middle class, then the monarchs can't use them as leverage against the nobles. Does that make sense? I think it does. I think I did a masterful job of that. I do say so myself. All right. So the trend that we see in Western Europe of landlords or nobles granting more liberties to the serfs doesn't happen. In fact, the opposite takes place. All right, so they intensify serfdom. All right, so much so that it becomes, well, there's little that would distinguish it from slavery. All right, and the conditions worsened, and the treatment and torture that took place was pretty stark. One of the things also that we need to understand is that the nobles maintained complete sovereignty over their land. That meant that the kings really had no control over anything that they was doing in their empire or in their little kingdom. Okay, like we see the trend in Spain or in England with the justices of the peace, or even the intendants moving around throughout the countryside, imposing royal justice and whatnot, and kind of keeping an eye on the nobles. That doesn't happen, all right? Not in Central and Eastern Europe. They pretty much can do whatever they want, all right? And so the treatment is pretty repressive, okay, and oppressive, and suppressive, yeah, repressive, oppressive, suppressive. Don't get much worse than that. All right, so Central Europe, powerful nobility, almost non-existent middle class, and a very weak monarchy. Do I need to say that again? Powerful nobles, they's way up here. Middle class is way down here. So is the monarchy, okay? And then the peasants is even further down, if you can imagine that. Okay. So that's pretty much it, okay? The other thing, I guess, since there were very few towns, there weren't a lot of merchants. So there weren't very few middle-class citizens, obviously. So what that meant is the commerce that took place from Eastern Europe was primarily agriculturally based, okay? I mean, it's not agriculture, but they sold a lot of timber, a lot of wood products and things like that. And so it would really be the nobles themselves that would go ahead and like export that stuff directly to other countries. So they didn't really need, there really wasn't much of a function for the middle class. So there were very few merchants, all right? There just weren't a lot of them. Okay, so that's it. So yeah, the Elbe River is kind of the dividing line. It's not a very good line because it doesn't continue on down here. But this pretty much kind of going all the way down here to Italy, to the, what is that? Is that the Aegean? No, that's the Adriatic. That's the Adriatic Sea right there. So all the way down there, pretty much everything to the east of this line would be, you know, that kind of feudalism existed. Okay, and the trend of weak monarchs. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, Poland. That's a mess. All right, Poland's right here. Okay, and after the 30 Years' War, this is still the boundaries of the Holy Roman Empire. But they have some problems, okay? And what's going to happen to Poland throughout the next 100 years is they're going to get gobbled up a couple of times. They're going to disappear. They're going to appear, and then they're going to disappear. They're going to play a little peekaboo. Sometimes they're going to be here. Sometimes they're not. Okay. So it's a crazy mixed up governmental system. I don't even know what you call it other than dumb. But the Polish monarchy was elected, all right, elected by the nobility. But the problem with the nobility is they all had the ability to veto individually, all right? And so the Diet had the ability to, one person could like oppose the election of a king. And so usually, as it happened, the kings typically were foreign, all right, so that meant that their interests lie elsewhere, okay? The term exploding the Diet was most often the work of a group of dissatisfied nobles, all right? So I just, kind of contradicted myself, but that's okay. I do that often. All right, so this price of noble liberty, all right? So it's a very decentralized state, weak monarch, which is consistent with what I said, but that's going to be the reason for their getting gobbled up. All right, they will eventually disappear. They will get absorbed by their neighbors, the Prussians and the Russians, not the Polish Russians, but the Prussians and the Russians. All right, so let's talk about Austria. All right, Austria has a big come to Jesus conversation with themselves after the 30 Years' War, okay? You should note that the Austrians attempted to centralize power, right? It was a war of religion, but it was also an attempt by the Habsburgs to consolidate their rule, All right, they wanted to kick out the Protestants it was a means to an end. Kicking out the Protestants would allow them to solidify, consolidate their power. All right, they failed. Yes, they did. They did fail. All right, and so they're licking their wounds after this. So their goal of stamping out Protestantism, fail. Their goal of creating a united Germany, fail. All right, but that doesn't mean that they disappeared. They're going to regain their juju. All right, but they're going to have to focus elsewhere. This is the land here in, I don't know what color it is. Chartreuse, something like that. Green, I guess. This is what they control, Austria, right here. All right, that's pretty much the extent of their territories. But what we're going to see is they're going to add territory here in Bohemia. Well, actually, they got that at the beginning of the 30 Years' War. But then they're going to extend down here into not quite the Balkans, but Eastern Europe, all right? Hungary and Transylvania, where Dracula lives and whatnot. So they're going to gain some territory to the southeast. That's going to be their focus, okay? They's going to the south into the east because they's not welcome here no more. All right. It's very decentralized. They are the Holy Roman Emperor. I mean, they possess that title, but it's meaningless. There's almost complete sovereignty. They are a federation or confederation, whichever word you like better. Okay, but like I said, they get their juju back. They do get some power, and it starts with Ferdinand almost immediately at the Bohemian phase. After they threw them cats out the window with the defenestration of Prague, Ferdinand II and the Catholic League, they crush the Bohemian uprising, all right, and they take possession of Bohemia, okay, and then they re-Catholicize it, but then they get rid of all the Protestant nobles and they install their own nobles, and they're rewarded then with loyalty, all right, by the new Bohemian nobility, all right. I'm just a poor boy from a poor family. Okay, you knew I wasn't going to go all through that without singing that once. So what we start to see happen is the creation of an absolute state, an absolute and strong monarchy. What do you have to be a strong monarchy? You must have the ability to tax, and you must, for the purpose of creating a strong military, permanent standing army, and that's what the Austrians were able to do. And it's through the, I guess, the help of gaining control of Bohemia. All right, the trend is going to continue with the reign of Leopold I. All right, so as the Holy Roman Emperor, he's going to move the HRE's influence to the southeast, but he's going to run into a wrecking ball, and the wrecking ball is the Otto the Boogeyman. All right, Otto the Boogeyman. The Ottomans are reconstituted. Okay, you may recall that the capital of the Holy Roman Empire is Vienna, and that the Ottomans once laid siege to it in 1529. Well, by 1683, they're going to be at it again. All right, but they're going to lose this time. Well, they lost last time, but they're going to lose this time, but they're going to lose big. All right, and when they lose, they're going to lose a lot of territory to the Austrians. All right, and they're going to be able to recapture that. So the Ottoman Turks, the old foe of the Holy Roman Empire, are at it again. All right, laying siege to Vienna, which lies right here on the Danube River. Yes. Take me to the blue Danube. Okay. Transylvania. The Ottomans lay siege to Vienna 1683, and it's actually with the help of the Polish they're able to repel it. But I like this little map here and this arrow, okay, that shows the influence of them, all right, and the territory that they gained possession of. So here's Vienna, 1683. This is all Hungary, and then Transylvania down there, and then they get this territory too, which gives them access to the Adriatic Sea. I think the city is Trieste, all the way down here, all right? And that's a Treaty of Karlowitz, 1698. or 99, Austria took control of Hungary, Transylvania, Croatia, and Slovenia. And like I said, that gives them access to the Adriatic. That's important. Warm water ports are very important for them, okay? Or anybody for that matter. Warm water meaning that they don't freeze in the wintertime. All right. Then they took part, the Grand Alliance. Remember the War of Spanish Succession? That silly, ugly man, Charles II, who looked so silly because he was the byproduct of so much inbreeding. Yeah, that guy. So remember the War of Spanish Succession, what they were supposed to do. Charles the Deuce was supposed to divide his realm between the Holy Roman Empire, right, and France. But unbeknownst to anybody, he secretly bequeathed it all, like that word, bequeath. He bequeathed it all to Philip of Anjou, who happened to be the grandson of Louis XIV. And so there was this giant war fought because they feared, the powers that be in Europe feared a unified French and Spain. What do we call that? Spance, or what is it? Frame or Spance. Yeah, this superpower here. They would have been able to defeat anybody, okay? And so the Grand Alliance was formed, okay? And that was the Netherlands, up here the Dutch Netherlands, Prussia, Austria, and then even England got involved in it. Okay, so the result of that war was Austria gets paid by getting the former Spanish Netherlands. Remember, those are the 10 southern, not the 7 northern. The 10 southern, those were the ones that were French and Catholic, right? And then they get Naples, Sardinia, Sicily, Milan. What else? Yeah, that's it. All right. So that territory gets added. So they're powerful. They got a lot of land. By 1713, they're pretty reconstituted, okay? But the problem is that it's all spread out from here to kingdom come, all right? And everybody's different. Everybody talks different. Everybody looks different. Everybody's different ethnicities. So there was really nothing to unite them, all right? And that's going to be a problem for them because when we fast forward to World War I, that's going to be a big problem for Austria. Well, then by then it's called the dual monarchy, Austria-Hungary, and they're going to have all kinds of troubles with ethnic minority groups fighting for what they call self-determination. That's nationalism. We're not there yet. All right, anyway. But they're a mess, right? They're very divided. The only thing that unites them is this common bond of service that the military officers and the new nobility has. All right, that's not going to last. That's not going to last. That's going to create problems you don't see for too long. All right, now we're going to talk about Prussia. At the end of the 30 Years' War, which is 1648, boys and girls, which is also, coincidentally, the end to period 1, right? Period 1, 1648. All right. So where is Prussia? Well, they a mess too. They look like a jigsaw puzzle, right? With half the pieces missing. You ever do that when you put together a jigsaw puzzle and then your little brother or something like eats like 2 or 3 pieces and you don't find that out until you're finished and then the puzzle's like, looks like this, like pieces are missing. Anyway, the Duchy of Prussia, that's part of them. But look at that's outside of the Holy Roman Empire, right? And then you got this Brandenburg, all right? And then they got this other kingdom called Pomerania. You ever see one of them Pomeranian dogs, those little white dogs, and they little yip-yap dogs? Can't stand those dogs. They bother me. People like to put them in their purse and they yip-yap-yap. Pomeranians. Yeah, never mind. Anyway, and then they got some of this territory out there. All right, so there's a lot of it's not contiguous, meaning it's not connected. All right. So they're weak. They have no natural borders, no natural boundaries, and so they got wrecked during the 30 Years' War, right? And so the Hohenzollerns, which is the ruling dynasty, figure out that it would be in their best interest to build a strong military to kind of prevent themselves from getting wrecked again, all right? And so the challenge is how to convince the nobility to tax without their consent, all right? And that's going to be the Freddies, all right? Frederick William, all right? That's it. Yeah. So no defendable borders, no rivers, no mountains or anything, mountain ranges like that really will protect them. Okay, and so they need a strong military. All right, so the Junkers, all right, these are the landowning nobles in Brandenburg and in Prussia that grant permission to Frederick William, the Hohenzollern dynasty, to go ahead and tax without their consent for the purpose of creating a permanent standing army. All right, but they're not going to get that permission just like that, just like that. They have to do something. All right, there's what we call a quid pro quo. I look like a dummy. I sound like a dummy too. Quid pro quo, all right? And what that means is this for that. Like, what you gonna do for me? I'll scratch your back, you go ahead and scratch mine. Quid pro quo. And the quid pro quo here is, in return for the permission to tax without their consent, then they get to do whatever they want to the peasants, to the serfs. Meaning, total subordination of the serfs by the Prussian Junkers, all right? That means that the state's got no say over anything that they do, all right? And the other thing is, the privilege that they get is they get to serve in the military, all right? They get to serve as officers. That's kind of similar. We saw that with Ferdinand and Isabella down there in Spain, okay? So he has some success. 1688, a population of 1 million people. They got an army of 30,000. What? That's less than 1/10 the size of France under Louis XIV, but they're going to get there. They're just not there yet. All right, they're going to get there, though. Okay, one of the things when Louis XIV revoked the Edict of Nantes, Frederick William invited the French Protestants into his realm. All right, I read good. Let's see. All right, and then his son, Frederick I, the ostentatious. Okay, he don't do anything for the military. Not really. He don't build it up. He is more concerned with building up Berlin, okay, and to create a court life there and make it a cultural center, Berlin, all right, which will become the capital. Well, it is capital and will remain the capital. And so he institutes a building program that's to try to rival that of, guess who? Louis and Versailles, all right? So Berlin is created to be modeled after, all right? It's going to take a long time. It's not just Frederick I. It's going to continue for two more Freddies. But there is something a title, I guess, that he gains other than the ostentatious in the War of Spanish Succession, his assistance in the War of Spanish Succession. He is recognized as the King of Prussia, all right? So no longer just a prince. He is a king of Prussia, all right? Now we need to talk about Russia, okay? These people on the far reaches, far eastern part of Europe, okay? So they're kind of an anomaly as a country because they straddle two continents, Asia and Europe. Culturally, I guess, they're somewhere between the two. They're not really, well, at least at this time, they're not really European, but they're not quite Asian. But they have quite a bit of influence from Asian powers. I guess the Mongols, the Russians historically, they're kind of pretty severe with their justice and violent. They're pretty violent people, and I think that a lot of that might come from being controlled for so long by the Mongols. But anyway, they lie in between Sweden and the Ottoman Empire. All right, they kind of sandwiched right in the middle of them. All right, and they only have one real coast or port, Archangel. All right, but the problem with it is, it's in the White Sea, I think is what that's called, and it freezes in the winter, and so, 6-8 months out of the year, they can't do anything about it. All right, so they lack warm water ports, and as a result of that, they're kind of isolated. They're isolated from the rest of Europe, and they're not very powerful, okay, because if you don't have a navy, you ain't going to be nothing. You're going to grow up, and you're going to be a loser if you don't have a navy. Got to have a navy. All right, but to get the Navy, they need warm water ports. All right, so I don't really want to talk too much about this guy, but he is nuts. Ivan the Terrible, all right? He is a boy who grew up had a rough life. Had the two most important people, his mother and his wife, were poisoned, supposedly by the boyars. They were the nobles, landowning nobles in Russia, and when they killed his wife, he went a little nuts. Here's a scene right here. He's struck his son in the head with a staff, killed his son, and he was a madman. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He had a good period before they killed his wife, where he had legal reform and a lot of acquisition of territory. But when his wife died, he went nuts. He sure did. So we don't really need to talk too much about Ivan. I got a lot more, but it's not really part of the AP exam as far as I'm concerned, or for as far as I know, rather. But there is a time of instability. This starts the beginning of the Romanov Dynasty, all right, and they're going to be around until like 1917. Okay, the Romanov Dynasty, 260 years or so. Let's see. Yeah, there's a time of trouble in between Ivan and then Peter the Great. So that's where we're going to kind of pick up. These are the funny-looking boyars. All right, so if you look at these guys, they don't dress very Western. All right, pants are starting to come online. At least knickers. All right, where they have the half pants. You know, like they go down to their knees, and they had long socks. But that I don't look anything like what the Western Europeans dress. They got the silly little hats and the long beards. All right, these are the boyars. All right, and they were kind of the butt of jokes by other Western Europeans. They were seen as very backwards culturally. All right, men wearing robes or dresses or whatnot. Peter the Great, he's a very important figure in Russian history. He westernized and modernized his country, and he expanded territory. Is he an absolute monarch? You betcha. Okay, so we talked about Sweden and the Ottoman Empire, kind of squeezing them. Well, on either side of both of them is what he stands, what he wants, and that's warm water ports. Okay, he's not able to gain warm water ports from the Ottoman, but down there in like the Black Sea region, he's able to gain more territory. But it's going to be Catherine the Great that does that. But he is successful in getting ports in the Baltic Sea. All right. And so he gets that from Sweden. But he recognized that Russia is a mess, that they are far behind. They're economically and culturally backwards. And so for them to, expand their influence, power, they need some updating. All right. So what he decides to do is go on a journey. All right. This talks about the youth, his youth, how there was I guess a little bit of a secessionary problem between he and his brother, and his sister caused some of the problems, and he underwent some of the same kind of fears that Louis XIV went, as far as during the Fronde. But ultimately, he is able to gain control of the military, and decides that he wants to modernize. So he goes on this grand embassy. All right, so from Moscow, he makes his way, all right, through Prussia, all right, to the Netherlands, okay, and from there he goes to England, London, and then he, on his return path, I guess that says Dresden. Well, anyway, then to Vienna, Austria, and then back, all right. So he makes some important stops along the way because he wants to learn about industry. He wants to learn about shipbuilding, and he wants to learn about military. So he wants to learn about like technology, shipbuilding, and then how to, like the modern way of like military tactics. Okay, and so he's going to bring some people back with him that are experts to kind of help implement some of these changes. All right, but again, warm water ports is kind of what he's after. All right, so these are some of the models of the drawings that they brought back with him of some modern ships. And this is how he kind of dressed. He dressed as a commoner. Nobody really knew that he was the king of Russia, and he wanted to kind of fit in. All right, but that's besides the point. That doesn't really matter anything. When he comes back, there's a revolt. He puts it down and then kind of goes to work in consolidating his power. One of the things that he does is, this is a very famous drawing, if you will, a piece of artwork here. The boyars, he ordered them to change their clothing and start dressing more Western-like. What part of that came with them needing to shave, all right? So they needed to shave their beards, and if they didn't shave their beards, they had to pay a tax, all right? So that's one of the more important things that he's known for, all right? He started to implement Western-style education too for the boys, the nobles, the male nobles. 5 years of compulsory education. Starts to try, institutes obviously education, but there's newspapers and stuff trying to copy a lot of the things that he saw on his grand embassy about Europe, right? And it has some benefit. He raises an army, grows almost to the size to rival that of France, okay? And he uses it to go to war against Sweden, all right? The Great Northern War. Russia takes on Sweden and is able to wrestle land away from them, gain some territory to give them a warm water port. This here is St. Petersburg, okay? And at the end of it, he just so happened to change the name to St. Petersburg and gain some of this territory as well, all right? And so he went to work immediately building a new capital there and telling all the boyars and various classes of people to pack their bags and move to Beverly. No, that's the hillbillies. Just kidding. Anyway, being silly. But they established a city on the coast here, all right? And he models it, you guessed it, after the Versailles Palace. So it took a lot of work. It was a very swampy land. A lot of people died in the process, but today it is a beautiful city. It does not look like a lot of the rest of Russia, except for this. All right, this is a Byzantine-styled church because of the domes, but this is Eastern Orthodox or Russian Orthodox architecture. All right, so that's how you know it's Russian, but everything else tells you it's Western European. Okay, I think that's it. It is only 32 minutes. Yeehaw! Enjoy the rest of your evening, babies. I'll see you.